How's that air conditioner noise? Let me just record a blank spot. Or actually, no, I got to turn on the recorder for this. Yeah, okay, I'm going to turn on the recorder, get some of this air conditioner noise, and then I will clip it. I'm going to make a noise profile of it, okay? Bear with me, guys. Let's see. Yeah, I got to hit the record button for that. Okay, that should work. Let me get this thing a little closer. Seems kind of hot tonight. Whatever. Let me just try to relax. All right, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is the Stephen D. Kelly Show. It's Thursday at 6:01 p.m. It's August. Yeah, August 4th. 9/4/2005. Guess that's still August. Whatever that means. Caesar Augustus. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the show. I don't really have a title for you tonight, but I need to discuss a lot of what's been going on, and I'm going to do my best to present it to you in a coherent form, as I always do. September? It's September? Is that what it is? September? It was August. Okay, sorry, September. Good, thank you for that. I don't do months. Okay, as I mentioned, yes, I see that. Thank you. September 9/4. Ooh, life marches on. Okay, let's see. Remember. The whatever of September. Anyway, 9/11 coming up, right? Anyway, so yeah. All right. Last week we talked about Trump being dead and Palantir taking over, and interestingly enough, what transpired over the week was pretty amazing. And I'm not talking about the SCO events in Peking. I will get to that, Beijing. But Donald Trump seemed to have made a miraculous recovery after being, I don't know, excuse me, out of the spotlight, disappeared incognito for a day or so. No, I don't normally do the whole, me, conspiracies? No, I don't do that. But, if I didn't know better, I'd say he was on death's door and they did stick him on a tube train and shipped him off to a bunker where they have such devices as these so-called med beds, whatever, and they revived his butt. If they didn't do that, they came up with a clone. I mean, my God, the thing that's up there now looks healthy enough, but some of these tweets or truths or whatever it is that he's doing on social media right now are even more insane than the original version or the previous version. So right away, I'm not going to go there, but until I saw that, I didn't really follow that stuff. Now I know that the real Trump, or the Trump that we saw that was on death's door with all the bruises and paleness and lack of orange and everything else going on, bloated legs and what have you, he had a lot to be stressed out about. I mean, obviously the Epstein thing is not going away. It's still not going away. We could talk about Epstein on this show and the whole what's going on with the Massey and the fake cover-up and the whitewashing and the fact that they're trying their best to throw as many surface pedophiles on the bus as they can. Obviously, the Epstein lists they're talking about releasing it. But here's the thing. They've had like half the FBI working day and night trying to redact any name, anywhere Trump's name shows up or anywhere anyone of any importance shows up, and basically the whole thing now is one big redaction. So it's really bad, and it's not just our government people, it's a lot of billionaires, and unfortunately these billionaires all seem to be Jewish supporters of Israel, and again, Israel's not the enemy here. And when I observe what went on in China, when I observe what's going on in Russia, and I try to put all this in context, is because obviously some of that stress that Trump is having probably came from the pain of him not going to the big world stage party that was being put on by Xi Jinping in Peking with his monstrous military parade that we're going to talk about, and everything else that he's done with all the world leaders there. Ridiculous amount of so-called Eastern Bloc, South Bloc, whatever you want to call them, non-ZOG controlled bloc, not the West Bloc. Anyway, a monstrous display of these people's solidarity, not the least of which were the most populous countries in the world, such as China, India, and then you throw in Russia and Indonesia, huge populations being represented. India and China, 1/3 of the world's population, right there. Boom. We were excluded from that. Of course, Trump's clone, whatever it is we want to call him, Rev 2, did complain and say that he wished him well for their World War II celebration, but he felt that they were just conspiring. Now, I want to examine the communist government that's in control of China, and I want to examine the historical events, and I want to examine their military industries in this parade. But I also need to talk about Russia a little bit and Putin. But before I do this, I need to suggest that we all are guilty of crimes in the past, and I think that Sergei Lavrov said it really well when he was asked about his CCCP sweatshirt that he wore around Alaska, which of course is it's the Soviet Union, Soviet Socialist Republic. Anyway, he said that we all have nostalgia for our past. Anyone who has a heart has nostalgia for their past, and they do too. But anybody with a brain knows better than to go back to the way it was. So in other words, Sergei Lavrov, a very intelligent man up there with Putin, of course, said that as Russians, they have a loyalty, patriotism, a place in their heart, their soul, their Russian identity for their past. And even though they understand all the wrong turns and mistakes and sins of their leaders and what have you, they still want to wear the rosy glasses when they view these events, so they can view them in a patriotic way. But they're looking forward, of course, and they know enough not to go backwards. Now, China, of course, hasn't really done that, and I have to bitch about this a little bit. But I guess before I have to do that, I have to say, what would this world be like today if Khazar Empire, had not been conquered by the Vikings, the Finns, the Slavs, the Nordic types that came in there on their longboats and established what would become modern Russia? What if that had never happened, or what if they had actually wiped out and genocided those Khazars so that they never fled to the Baltics and to these various places that they took refuge in, kind of like another tribe, so to speak? What would have happened? We never had the Bolshevism created in Lithuania, or we never had Zionism. What if Zionism was never created? It's very possible that could have happened should the Russians have been, well, less merciful. Either way, when Putin talks about the history of Russia, he leaves that part out. Conveniently, they leave that part out. The plague, the scourge upon earth. I'm not talking about the scourge of the people of Solomon, the descendants of the tribes that worshipped Babylonian, Phoenician deities and passed their children through the fire. I'm not necessarily talking about them, but I'm talking about the people of the Caucasus, what would become the Caucasus. We call the Caucasus the Khazars Empire, which are the basis of the people today that predominantly identify themselves with this tribe or these people of the descendants of Solomon, the so-called Semites. Never mind the Phoenician and Babylonian connections. But the point is that this poison, and it is a poison, whether you want to call it a religion, a tribal structure, a genetic structure, whatever it is, this ideology is a poison. It's anti-human because, just like Solomon did so long ago, it used human sacrifice and demon worship to achieve its objectives. And this is still operating within our society. So every society is full of it. And every society, as I look at these pages, non-Western pages, pro-Russia, pro-China, pro-whatever, anything but the United States. And I look at these people denigrate and say terrible things about the United States and the president, etc., Donald Trump. And you know how I feel about it, of course. One guy, I don't know who he was, just your average idiot, I suppose. You never know these people. They hide behind these phony screen names. It could be someone with a cell phone in Bangladesh. I have no clue. But he made a comment. He said that in light of some sort of comparison to Xi Jinping, he said that Donald Trump was a caveman. And now obviously this sounds awful racist because, whenever I hear something other than a Caucasian calling us Caucasians cavemen, obviously that is a strong form of racism. But I pointed out to this person, Xi Jinping was actually born in a cave, a hole in the rock, cut in a rock or dirt or whatever inside of a hillside. He, like many people from where he lives, this is what they did. They didn't have lumber. They lived in holes in the dirt. And yet, somebody calls this guy a caveman. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, there's a lot of history and a lot of details and all sorts of tech and everything else to talk about, but where do you start? Well, let's talk about the spectacle of this big event. Lots of big things happened. First of all, there was the SCO conference. This is the Shanghai, is it the Shanghai Cooperation? I can't remember. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But either way, this thing, SC, cooperative or organization, Shanghai Cooperation. Anyway, huge amount of countries. So it was their big giant meeting. But at the same time, China was celebrating the 80th anniversary of the so-called defeat of imperialist Japan by China in World War II. Now, historically speaking, I have a lot of issues with this stuff for a lot of reasons. Lots of reasons. Now keep in mind, here is Xi Jinping walking around Peking, strutting around like a peacock, showing off the wares of modern Chinese society, wearing a suit resembling that of Chairman Mao, the great leader, the leader of the so-called Great March, or I don't remember what their slogans were anymore, but golden, whatever, enlightenment. Anyway, the point is that Mao was a fucking idiot. Okay? A fucking idiot. He too was probably born in a cave. I would not be surprised. He may have been whatever education, but the bottom line is he was a follower of Marx and Lenin and those Bolshevist bastards. Now, before I continue too far, I'm just going to point out that this one organization, Bolshevism and Zionism, and I'll start with Bolshevism, mostly is responsible for the most genocide in the entire world. Obviously, the Rothschilds, which are essentially the fathers of all this, with their kingdom of Belgium and their 100 million dead in the Congo, is certainly a lot. And not to dismiss the 100 million Native Americans that died in North America at the hands of the so-called Western expansion. That's we can't forget that. Neither can we forget taking the land away or forcing Santa Anna to give us half of the country from Mexico and the subsequent genocide of the Comanche by the genocide of the buffalo, which is what their food source was. Did we kill those people? I guess ultimately, so however many million of them. But the point is that when I look at China, and I look at the influence of Mao, Karl Marx, Lenin, in other countries, not the least of which is Cambodia and Pol Pot. Ho Chi Minh, I don't really have a lot of problem with him. I think he was a pretty great leader. Obviously, he was deluded by his following, but these are simple farmers and they don't know any better. But either way, let's see how many people did Pol Pot kill? 30 million? So many examples of the stupidity of Chairman Mao, whose great leap forward, whatever the hell he did. First of all, they killed off all the intellectuals, anybody with any brains whatsoever. I mean, if you could read or write or you were an author or anything whatsoever, you were killed off. Your property was taken. That was all crushed. The art in China, the jade, the carvings, whatever. What exists today in that country is forgery because they destroyed everything. They destroyed every temple, every Buddhist statue, every bit of art, silk, jade, everything. The only place the actual stuff exists anymore is the stuff that was taken into Taiwan at the end of World War II, or at the end of World War II, when those forces were defeated by the communists. The communists like to say that they defeated them, but that's really the main issue I kind of want to focus on here, is that I go into all the secondary issues. But the point is, this so-called anniversary of the so-called victory, this thing pisses me the fuck off, because these communists were rising up and fighting a civil war in their country, a Bolshevist, Marxist revolution in China, and they were engaging in combat with whatever the name of that country was, Chiang Kai-shek and his nationalist forces. I want to say Kuomintang, something like that. But anyway, those guys, I will refer to them as the nationalists. But the point is, they were guerrilla peasant warriors, no better than the idiots under Pol Pot that killed 30 million people. That was Chairman Mao's people. Dirty, low-life peasants. And I'm not defending any country, but I'm just going to say that those were the uneducated mob. The easily convinced, the easily controlled. Who bankrolled Mao in this revolution? Billionaires, such as the Rothschilds. Banks, British banks. Mao, he reminds me a lot of Stefan Bandera. And I know this is going to sound really strange to a lot of people, but Stefan Bandera, of course, was the leader of the so-called Banderites over there in Ukraine. The godfather, the patron of all the Ukrainian Nazis that we support today. But the thing is that this guy played it both ways, and he was a nationalist, unlike Mao, of course. He was anti-Bolshevist, but he was also He was anti-Nazi. He was anti-communist. He fought at one time against the Nazis, and he fought at one time against the Soviets. He played both sides. Mao did the same thing. He played both sides. He had very prominent spies inside of the Japanese system that basically he used to play both sides. Now, here's the thing. The troops under Mao, the so-called 8th Avenue or whatever they call themselves, brigade, path, 8th Avenue, some stupid name they call these, 8th Course, I don't know. They had nothing. They had to steal everything, steal their weapons. And they stole it from the Japanese when they did fight the Japanese. And they did have heavy losses, and they lost like 1.5 million people fighting the Japanese. These are the communists now, not the nationalists. Nationalists obviously lost a lot of people in battle too. But when the Japanese, when they fell in battle, or when they were going to lose a battle to the Chinese, who they considered racially inferior, they would kill themselves rather than be captured. So it's very difficult to understand the true nature of these battles that took place. But the bottom line is that the communist forces of Mao lost 1.5 million people. That is a lot of people. But at the same time, they worked for the Japanese, and they did everything they could to pass information on the nationalist side to the Japanese. Because you see, when Japan invaded China, the Civil War took a hiatus, and Mao and his communist forces supposedly agreed with the forces of Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist forces, the people that controlled China, to work together to defeat the Japanese. And yes, like I said, he did lose a lot of his people to the Japanese, but at the same time, his spies fed crucial information about nationalist formations to the Japanese so that they would take as much of the damage as possible in fighting. And they would be weakened to such a point that when the time came that the Japanese were finally defeated, they would emerge the stronger party, kind of like the United States did in World War II, waited it out until the last minute. And we have a habit of doing that. We did that in World War I also. But either way, the communist forces captured from the Japanese enough hardware, guns, ammunition, tanks, etc., to launch a successful attack against Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist forces and defeat him. So in other words, like the scum that he was, like the dishonorable dog that he was a disloyal ally. And the entire time that he supposedly was fighting against the Japanese, he was scheming to take over the country for his own greater glory and the betterment of what he thought was going to happen for the Chinese people. Of course, the result was Chiang Kai-shek's forces retreated to Formosa, and Taiwan was created, and the Chinese will never let that go. But let's talk a little bit about some of the glorious things that this dog Mao did. Aside from killing all the landowners and anybody with an education, he really rendered everybody stupid for quite a long time. Fucking idiot. But here's one of the great, brilliant, genius moves that Mao did. He decided that birds, sparrows, were bad for the farming because they would fly into the fields and eat the grain, devour the seed before the plants could grow, and they could get their wheat and their corn, whatever it was that they were trying to grow, their rice. So he got the genius idea to tell all, however many million people were living there in China, to go out and kill as many birds as they could lay their eyes on by any method possible. And they would go out and make noise and bang on pots and drive the birds crazy and drive them away. Anytime a bird tried to rest, they would drive it away. They would destroy their nests, shake the trees, whatever. They showed old pictures of trucks filled up with dead sparrows. Trucks filled with dead sparrows. They put a bounty on sparrows. The government, that's Mao's doing. So that every idiot farmer and every idiot Chinese would go out and kill every bird that they could lay their eyes on with whatever means possible. And they would get a little bounty. You know what? They succeeded in killing all the birds. And to this day, there's no birds. Seriously. You want birds? Go to Taiwan. You want birds in China? They're imported. They're usually on a leash or in a special display. Their wings are trimmed. You don't see birds. If you do see a bird in China in a park, you know what happens? Some Chinese grandma will grab it and make soup out of it, noodles. Seriously, they come here to USA and they're in the parks and a little bird lands next to them, and seriously, they shove it in their pocket and go home and make noodles. Some things don't change. You know, one of the other genius ideas that Mao came up with, he decided that the glorious people of China should all learn how to make steel. So he said, okay, everybody, all you farmers, I know you're brilliant, you're geniuses, and one of you can come up with some genius way of making steel. So all of a sudden, all the farmers all across China decided to stop what they were doing and build smelters and try to learn how to make steel. And of course, what happened? Everybody starved. Kind of like they did when they killed all the birds. What do you think happens when you kill all the birds? Grasshoppers, locusts, things that eat the plants, worms, beetles, larvae, you name it. No birds to eat that stuff. So whatever crops they thought they were going to grow were eaten, consumed. So yeah, Mao. Let me see. Was that brilliant move that led to the death, starvation, famine? Was that intended? Did you want to kill all those people because your owners, the Rothschilds, they said, well, you know, do this, wink, wink, haha. Were you that stupid? My God. I could come up with a million examples, but the point is, Mao was a fucking idiot. And here we have idiot Xi Jinping, so-called strongman. And yeah, he is a dictator. Of course he's a dictator. The Communist Party is not a democracy, so-called democracy. It's not a republic. There's no checks and balances. There's no transparency whatsoever. Every single one of those people in that system is a rubber stamp that's going to do what they are told, or else their lives are at stake. They know it. I'm not saying anybody else is any better. I'm just examining this system here. Now, me personally, if I look at the events that made these great transformations in these various different countries, especially the one in China, where we had different people go in there, Rothschild agents, etc., billionaires, to fund those organizations and to set those movements up. The point is those people, they don't go away. When you look at the, well, what's the point I'm trying to make? All right, let me just focus on this, the parade. The parade that was put on in China was very impressive, and of course it was to commemorate this alleged defeat And before I describe the technology and the armaments that were on display, at one point there was, and this surprised me, but Xi Jinping was greeting some veterans from this war. And these people that were 900 years old, obviously the war was 80 years ago. They had to be at like 20 something to be fighting, 1920, just to be fighting, allegedly, you know, we would think, right? But either way, they had about 6 of them lined up, roughly, I suppose. And he greeted each one. And as they greeted them, they were identified. And they were all members of this, whatever you want to call it, eighth column thing. But to get to the last one, and it was a fighter from the Nationalists. I thought, wow, really? You're going to allow the Nationalists, the people that actually defeated Japan. Again, I don't know how many people they lost, but it's probably because they weren't cavemen. They probably weren't trying to take on tanks with sticks. But hey, these guys, again, they didn't take over the country until after the Japanese lost. And who was it that really beat the Japanese at this point? Was it the Russians? Was it Nagasaki and Hiroshima? I mean, obviously the Russians, they didn't even dive in and get crazy with Japan until after Japan had already lost the war. I never forgot about that. But you know, there was a photo, there was an event, I think this took place in 1950, where Mao was photographed at some event with some billionaire, and he was explaining to these people that if it wasn't for the Japanese invasion, that his people, his forces, would have never been able to conquer the nationalist army or the people that they were fighting, the legitimate government of China that they were fighting in their civil war. He acknowledged that the Japanese invasion and the subsequent weakening of the nationalist forces was the only reason that they had any chance to win that battle. And the other thing he said was, well, people, these Russians or these Bolsheviks or these people that yearn for the days of Stalin, they look at that and they go, what the hell was he doing talking to a billionaire? Who do you think paid for it? Who do you think financed it? Who do you think runs it today? So China's the big bugaboo that we're supposed to worry about when we saw those weapons on display in that parade. All right. Again, I'll remind people that after Vietnam, after the United States made the hasty exit of Vietnam and left behind so many weapons that were captured by the Northern forces and eventually were incorporated into their military, all of those weapons were put to very good use against China when China decided to invade the uppermost northern borders of North Vietnam to teach them some kind of a lesson. And like I said, the Chinese made very good use of those American weapons, very much similar to the way the troops of Mao made very good use of those Japanese weapons against the forces of Chiang Kai-shek. Well, yeah, those Vietnamese, those northern Vietnamese spanked the Chinese. Of course, they'll tell you otherwise. But to me, that's the only real skirmish I've seen China involved in. Okay? Now, I know a lot of people like to laugh about America, and I know America, when they get down to it, they can be pretty damn bloodthirsty. And ever since the nuclear weapons, they haven't really focused on as much on the other stuff as they should. And they've never had a proper war economy thinking or the ability to see past profit and military industrial complex dividends to really properly protect our country. And why is that? Probably because the same people that funded and set up China, this so-called adversary that we're going to talk about the weapons they displayed, are the people controlling this country. In other words, those same people that one time lived in the area of Russia that want so badly to get it back that we're now trying to defend in Ukraine, making everybody in Europe bankrupt to kill off all those Slavs in the process. Those very same people are committing genocide in Gaza right now. Mommy, I don't want to eat my vegetables. Eat your vegetables. There's starving children in Gaza. Mommy, send my vegetables to starving children in Gaza. If I could do a Netanyahu impersonation, this is what I would say. No child. That is verboten. Yeah, well, things we are willing to overlook. Well, anyway, let's talk about this parade. Now, first of all, those soldiers marching in the parade, unlike in America, didn't have a choice. Hey, now, cut that out. Cat bit the other cat the other day. Not good. Places like North Korea, China, what have you. Oh, sure, they put on wonderful parades, but you know, unlike perhaps Russia and May Day, where they're truly patriotic, what have you, I think that they're all compelled to do it. And from what I understand, especially in places like China and North Korea, etc., it takes a good year of training and preparation to put on such a display. And again, what I should point out is that display that went on in China was the entire People's Liberation Army, which encompasses every branch of their service. Unlike the so-called anniversary of the Army party that Trump put on, which was this meager, weak show that for the U.S. Army, single branch, people wondered why they didn't have stealth aircraft going up and down the road like they did. You know, it's funny. Seriously, I mean, when we looked at these old parades that the Russians would put on May Day, and it was very similar to the parade that went on here in China, they have the long trucks with the missiles, and we never really pursued that. In the United States, of course, we do the Air Force. It's not like you're going to have a bunch of F-35s going down the street. We don't do that. That's not our thing. And it's like the Chinese, they unveiled these trucks with these big giant lasers rolling down the street. Do you think the United States would show the lasers that we've had? No! That's old technology. Hell, we've had that stuff since Clinton, practically going back to Jimmy Carter. And if anything, we're using it now for covert actions like, you know, killing Palestinians in the West Bank, or burning up neighborhoods like Pacific Palisades, Maui, you know, or Paradise, California. Take your pick. Paint your roof blue. Apparently that's because these lasers use ultraviolet, and the blue will absorb the ultraviolet. You know what else is interesting about the ultraviolet? The F-35s use ultraviolet. I'll tell you something about the F-35s that make them so special that is different than what the Japanese, or not the Japanese, but the Chinese or the Russians do, and that is ultraviolet wavelengths. We don't use infrared anymore for our guidance or what have you. We use ultraviolet, and this requires very special optics, usually sapphire optics. And sapphire optics are very difficult to make. And, you know, I used to use the ability to make optics as one of the big, measuring sticks of what these governments can do. And I haven't seen what the Russians can do, and I haven't seen what the Chinese can do, and I haven't seen what the Japanese can do, but I'm pretty sure it's not all that. And I'm pretty sure that, yeah, sure, the United States has probably slipped a lot since I've been involved, because they've been trying to come up with ways to use computers to do stuff that gifted hands need to do. But I have a feeling that American technology is still way, 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 way ahead of everybody else. And we don't show it, because most of the stuff that we have It's awful. It's god awful. It's horrible. It has the ability to do mass destruction and death. I mean, seriously, you're showing off all your military might in one location when suddenly there's a earthquake that destroys everything. I mean, seriously, people, until you understand what true power is, all of these displays are for people that don't know any better. I will say one thing about the Chinese, because obviously I was in the laser business and I was in all this stuff, and they do like to leapfrog their technology, which means that they're always trying to stay at least one step ahead. But yes, pretty much everything we saw is a copy of something made in the United States. It's always been that way. Everything they do, everything. And sure, we gave them the knowledge, we gave them parts to them. Hell, we taught the Japanese quality control. It was Bell and Howell back in the 50s. You know, people that made projectors, they wanted Japanese-made lenses and stuff, so they had to teach the Japanese a system of quality control. And the rest is history. Okay? But the point is, people, who allowed it? Now, if you look outside my door, you're not going to see any Japanese, Chinese, Korean, whatever, cars in the driveway, European. You'll see 2 Chryslers and a Ford. Whatever you want to say about those companies, the parts that go into those things, they're still American. And if you don't bite the bullet and buy American, you get what you pay for. I would have never opened up China to America. I would have never been like Nixon, who was an Intertel mafioso, to go in there and open up our markets and let our companies set up in that country and destroy our country, the United States, from within. Our country was destroyed by letting the Chinese replace American companies for cheap products because they don't care. Pennies on the dollar, that's all they care. If they make a penny for every dollar they spend, they're happy. We don't do that here. And they don't care. When the wall came down in Russia, who did that? Reagan, another Intertel mafia stooge. Mr. Gorbachev, bring down this wall. What happened? Oligarchs, who all happen to be Chabad Jewish mafia, descended upon the West. They gutted what was left of Russia and gave people like Donald Trump billions. You know, Donald Trump has made billions off of his stupid Truth Social thing that he uses to make all his crazy remarks now, which should be completely against the law. Obviously, it's a conflict of interest. He has no controls, and yet he thinks that's okay, and we look so stupid. Should he have been at the Shanghai conference? Yeah. Or would they be talking about him? Probably. Why? Look what he did. He sent Modi and India into the arms of China with a 50% tariff. Are you stupid? You realize the Chinese built, well, the Russians are going to build a pipeline from Siberia through Mongolia into central China. I don't remember what they call that, but the point is that it's going to revolutionize the energy sector. China will no longer buy LNP, liquefied petroleum, from the United States. No longer. We have this great way of destroying ourselves, and then we blame everybody else. Anyway, people, I could go on and on. I'm disappointed in Putin. If you had any control over these people, how about Falun Gong? Why are they still harvesting organs? That's another similarity to the Chabad Jews in Ukraine that are harvesting organs. That's another thing they probably got from their Rothschild masters, harvesting human organs. Big money-making scheme in China. Inhuman, monstrous, evil, wicked shit. You can never forgive a country for doing that. incarcerating people and harvesting their organs. It's monstrous. Who else does that? Gee, sure a lot of rabbis get busted when those rings go down. Anyway, the colonial shit aside, they're all guilty. I look at Modi and I think India, well, India's got its own problems, but you know what? We're not making any friends with Trump's policies. And we're not here to talk about India right now, even though I have issues with what's going on with the Hindus being shipped in here. Oh my God, Britain. You know, here's the thing. Nationality, we talk about this nationality crap. You realize I thought about it, you know, people say, oh yeah, I'm English. I think about a friend of mine here, half English, half something else. I think, wait a minute, pretty soon there's going to be no English. Just like there's going to be no Irish, there's going to be no Germans, no Swedes, no Danish. Who's responsible for this? The same people that are doing it here in the United States, trying to turn us into a bunch of damn mongrels with no cultural identity, but they get to have theirs, but we don't. Okay, they get to have a religion and a national identity, which is supposed to be genetic. What in the fuck is this bullshit? People are getting over it. Hell, even Alex Jones shut down an interview because they said they were being too critical of Israel. Seriously. They don't even hide it anymore. Don't even hide it. All right, anyway, people. Let's see. I told you I got ordered new glasses last week. They should show up in a week. God willing. Looking forward to that. I'll have to make a little video and show you my new glasses when I get them because they're kind of interesting. They're different. I got tactical glasses because I figure they're going to be a little more durable and maybe protect the glass if they fall on the ground, you know, a little bit more. Such is life. But anyway, thanks for the donations for that. Definitely made it possible because it was like even more money as I was. Yeah, the frames cost more money probably, but either way. What else? We are being pretty stifled out there, but at the same time, I see more people talking about this stuff, and I see more effort by the enemy to try to confuse everyone about who we are and what we're doing. So I do depend on you guys even more to try to go out there and fix that. Okay? Well, I do need you guys more of you to join the group over there on Telegram, of course, which is Occupy the Getty / Stephen E. Kelly. And if you are, those of you that are recording, thank you very much. Please do your best to go out and spread it, but don't ever change the title. If I give you a title like what I said, The Death of Trump, that was very important. I wanted to get that energy out there. This time around, what can I say? I know after I end the show, I'll think, oh, I forgot I wanted to say this. Let's see what else. We are in some rough times, and there's a lot of stress going on. And I just want to advise people to think twice about everything you do. Seriously. Take a step back. Don't burn your bridges. If somebody tells you that that's the thing to do, no, it's probably not. Just be advised that there's a lot of really bad information out there and a lot of effort being made to sway your opinion in the wrong direction. So keep an open mind, but at the same time, do your best to try to focus on our issue, the Occupy the Getty issue, because we are reaching a really oppressive regime coming up right in front of our faces. And I think that you've already committed this much so far. I think all of us that are doing the work right now, it's important that you just do more because we're already branded. They know who we are. And at this point, we know we win. We've got to make that thing happen because, well, we have their fear on our side. Okay? They're doing all of this nasty, oppressive stuff because of us. So if we don't like what they're doing, we need to work harder to make them stop. Anyway, once again, if you can help me out economically, it's the PayPal is Stephen Kelly 714 at yahoo.com. Please say friend or family, or I'll send it back. Otherwise, every day I'm going to try to keep doing what I can do to think of what I can do to push this mission further. I know a lot of you out there think that I'm doing this tirelessly. Yeah, it is tirelessly. I mean, there is nothing else to do. This is it, and yeah, I will do this till I die. And I suppose we should all be fortunate to find our purpose and to actually get something that we could devote our energy to that is this important. So, best I can do is hope that you'll join me. All right? All right. And those of you that have joined me, like I said, I love you so much. Once again, my name is Stephen E. Kelly. And this is the Stephen E. Kelly Show at TruthCat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. And it's now 6:51 p.m. September 4th, not August. You know, I just got through getting used to the word August in my head now. September 4th, 2025. Got it. I'll get the recording out for you as quick as possible, but if you're listening to the thing on the station, welcome. Anyway, okay, I'll see you guys next week. I'll see you in the group. I'll look for your emails at lost17gun@aol.com. Okay, that's where you send correspondence. Okay? All righty, guys. All right. Good night. God bless. Adios. Goodbye.